Hello and welcome to another edition of Agenda 2063 TV show, the only show in Ghana, the region, continent, telling us authentic stories about Africa's integration. But even though we spend the better part of the series talking sometimes about AfCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, we're always going to come back to viewers and listeners to talk about Agenda 2063, because it is the African man's dream, and it's important that we unpack it for people to understand it and to buy into the idea that Agenda 2063 is here to stay. It doesn't have to be realized by 2063 when some of us will be gray and old. It can be realized before then. It's an aspiration. So let's see what we can do about it by using things like this show to help people understand Agenda 2063. My name is E.K. Benson Jr., your regular host for the show. Nice to be coming your way. We're going to take a break in a minute, then we'll be right back with the two segments for you. We'll be right back. So we're going to start off with the Ear on East Africa. And here on East Africa, we have some very exciting updates. Usually what we do with Ear on East Africa is to give you updates of developments in that region of the continent. There's a lot of very dynamic things happening there. So sometimes we'll give you stories or just give you developments on Twitter, some of the things that have popped up. One of the things that we can confidently report to you is that Ethiopia has inaugurated its commercial bank, the very new headquarters of its commercial bank. It is now the tallest building in East Africa and the third in the continent. The tower is 209.50 meters tall with 53 floors and 1,500 parking lots. When you take a look at the pictures, what you will see, very beautiful big monuments standing right in the middle of the capital city. And at night, from the pictures, it looks very, very beautiful. Once again, something that the Chinese have built. We also know that the AU building was built by the Chinese. So clearly the Chinese have very important interests in East Africa and the rest of the continent. But in East Africa especially, it looks like they're very keen to be helping with infrastructure. So that's that with the commercial building. The moving still on to East Africa. The Lake Turkana Wind Power Project is in northern Kenya, and it is the largest wind power plant in Africa. Note that, the largest wind power plant in Africa. It generates about 310 megawatts of power to the national grid. So anytime I speak to my Kenyan friends, and I tell them that we have lights off, or in Ghana, as they call Dumso, they're wondering why that keeps happening a lot of the time, even though the power has been pretty stable of late. And the thing is this, in Kenya, Kenya Power has been doing quite a bit of good work and has been, I think the government has been investing quite heavily in power systems, probably in a way that here in Ghana, we could do a lot better in, even though we also export into other countries in the sub-region. Which is strange why we don't always, our lights are not always stable and regular. So what Kenyans often get are power disruptions. So disruptions of power that sometimes, as witnessed like 3 weeks ago or so, when it trended on the Kenyan Twitter, you will see that people were complaining that the power, something had gone off in one of the systems that help distribute power to the city of Nairobi, and I think it had gone off or something due to wind or something had triggered it off. So almost for the better part of the day, citizens of Nairobi and much of Kenya did not have power, but it was fixed very soon after that. So clearly what we are seeing is that Nairobi is identifying different ways in which it can help feed the power, the national grid. And this clearly is the future, and this is the way we need to go as far as electricity. So I hope that countries like Ghana will be learning from what Kenya has been doing, even though we also have the expertise. Let's also talk a bit with them to see how they have been able to have regular supply of electricity for many, many, many months than we are able to. Now, still continuing with East Africa, there's some news that the construction of a bridge in Tanzania, which is a bridge that will go over Lake Victoria, will enter a new phase, and the bridge is called Kigongo Busisi Bridge. The 3.2 kilometer and 28.45 mile wide bridge will be the longest bridge in East Africa and the 6th longest on the continent. So already, just from these three stories, we're seeing that Kenya is not Kenya. East Africa is coming up with milestones. Ethiopia has come up with the largest building in East Africa with the Central Bank of Ethiopia. Lake Turkana, also the largest solar wind power system. And then we're also seeing this one in Tanzania, Lake Victoria. This Kigongo Busisi Bridge. So this suggests that East Africa is doing a lot of very exciting and dynamic things. I think a lot of us need to be following and see what we can do to emulate them and even have conversations with them. In an area of the African Continental Free Trade Area, I think they're getting quite smart, and we need to get a bit more dynamic on that. Continue still with East Africa. This one is about an appointment. Deloitte East Africa has announced Anne Muraya as the incoming Deloitte East Africa CEO. She will be the first female CEO for Deloitte East Africa and will oversee Deloitte's offices in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, and other East Africa locations. Still with East Africa, almost done with East Africa, Kekebet Dam along the Barka River in Eritrea was built by Eritrean engineers and also fully funded by Eritrea. It's good to know because Eritrea has had a lot of bad news around it for many years, being in the region they call the IGAD region, where it's situated with Djibouti, Ethiopia, and the countries in the Horn of the continent. So nice to know that Eritrea is able to have its own money to do a lot of things rather than relying on multilateral institutions. Then we're almost done with the East Africa story. And they say this is a fact, that you go to Nairobi to do business, you go to Kampala to party and have fun, and you go to Kigali to sleep. They say this is a popular remark used by most East Africans about the capital cities in the region, suggesting, I guess, that Nairobi is the place where people are really serious and there's a lot of institutions to help create this atmosphere of people working. Kampala, they like to have fun. They're very loud and open-minded, and they like they're chilling much more than Nairobians do. Nairobians are more serious with their business. Those in Uganda like to chill and have fun. And when you go to Kigali, Kigali is so organized and disciplined that the only thing that you can do is to sleep. I don't know what you think about that, but that's what East Africans are saying. We'll be finding out the true state of that statement later. And then finally, some rather sad news on East Africa is that there's a post that says that a drying East Africa fuels ongoing conflicts in Somalia and Kenya, which suggests that there's some challenges on climate, and also with the stories about the locusts and desertification that we've been hearing in the East African region causing hunger and all these things. That is still there. A lot of climate change challenges that are happening, and those are things that clearly, I think in West Africa also we're having with the Sahel region and the drier parts of the region. But in East Africa, it's something that they clearly need to work on. So that's really it with the AON East Africa. Hope it was a very exciting segment that has helped you better understand and appreciate what the region is doing. We're going to take a quick break in a minute, then we'll come to APRM Watch, where we will give you very important updates on developments of that AU institution. We're going to take a break in a minute. We'll be right back. Okay, so welcome back from the break. I'm with APRM. APRM Twitter feed has been quite buzzing for the past couple of days. The fourth edition of the AU APRM end-of-year biannual sovereign credit rating review report has presented an analysis of the long-term foreign currency sovereign credit rating actions in Africa. In English, what that means basically is that the African Union and the APRM, which is an autonomous agency of the AU, responsible for good governance, promoting good governance on the continent and doing reviews and helping governments get on track on ensuring that they maintain standards of good governance. Together with the African Union, they have come out with the fourth edition of their publication, looking at sovereign credit ratings. Sovereign credit is important on the continent because what that does is it allows countries to know the state of the country and whether it is credit worthy, okay? Whether it can still get it's good enough to receive credit from multilateral donors and all these other institutions. Sometimes you'll get ratings from organizations like Moody and Fitch that we like to hear a lot. What these institutions are really telling us, credit rating agencies are telling us, is that if it's a C, it means that you are okay to get credit. When it's a B or an A, it means that your economy is doing very well. But of late, what we have seen is that sometimes, even when an economy is doing well in Africa, these institutions of Moody and Fitch and so on, which are Western institutions, may say that you have a C or lower rating, which will disproportionately affect your economy, because then what that will do is that it will tell the world that you don't have enough, you're not qualified enough to get sufficient credit to run your government and to run things in the economy. And that is a problem, reason for which the African Peer Review Mechanism, which is also responsible for looking at credit rating and helping establish a continental credit rating system, decided to issue a press release the other day, almost at the same time that Ghana also issued a statement criticizing one of the multilateral credit agencies, Fitch, Moody, for downgrading the rating of Ghana. For APRM, in the press release that they issued last week or so, they made recommendations on what Ghana needs to do, and also some of the challenges that come with Western credit rating agencies. Sometimes they have one person looking at 15 countries, and sometimes they don't even go to those countries to look at the internal dynamics of that country and just make blanket statements. That does not augur well for that country. So one of the recommendations APRM has made is that Africa should begin to look at having its own credit rating agencies. 2 days ago, Ghana was on the news that Ghana Stock Exchange, for example, will set up a credit rating agency in June, which is a good way, it's a good start for countries, African countries, in having their own, building their own capacity to say our economy is not good, it's good, or what these international institutions are saying are good or not. So I think we're on the right track with the credit rating, and the role that APRM is playing in it will begin to unpack over the next couple of weeks, because APRM believes that the mandate that AU member states gave to APRM when they expanded the mandate in 2017, 2018 was to also say that good governance, credit rating reviews are also part of good governance. When your economy is downgraded or upgraded, it affects your governance. And since APRM has everything to do with good governance, they were given that mandate to also assess and look at. So you'll be hearing a lot more about APRM and its response to things like Moody and so on. And an example of this is that in one of the other tweets of APRM, is that the report looks into the review done by 3 dominant international credit rating agencies, which are Moody's, Fitch, and S&P Global, during the second half of 2021, and makes recommendations to African countries on how to improve their ratings. So that's a good sign that Africans are beginning to do their own thing, no matter how difficult, no matter how long it has taken. We are seeing some very important signs that we're beginning to claim the space for our own self. some very other interesting stories on APRM. A couple of days ago, APRM reported that Liberia has launched the Institute of Directors, which was a recommendation made by APRM to Liberia a couple of years ago when they did a review of the country. So the APRM was represented by Tumi Dlamini, who is a senior policy officer responsible for corporate governance of African countries and also APRM. She spoke on the role of good corporate governance practices to build a strong and resilient private sector for stronger economies. APRM peer-reviewed Liberia in 2018 and recommended the formation of an Institute of Directors. So congratulations to Liberia for this significant milestone. And APRM says they commit to cooperate with the country as they help build an inclusive economy. These are pretty much it, stories, the highlights of APRM. We're going to take a break in a minute, then we'll come back with the mixed bag that we talked about. We were supposed to have an interview with Miranda Lutempo, who is the senior policy officer who is here in Accra on a working visit at AfCFTA Secretariat. She unfortunately was not able to make it today, but she has sent a story about an event that she organized last week in Malawi, which we'll be able to give you a quick update on in a minute. So we're going to take a break in a minute and we'll be right back with the mixed bag of some of the stories that have been taking place over the past couple of days, for which fall into the category of this show. We'll be right back. All right, so welcome back from the break. And so even though we're not able to bring Miranda Lutempo because she's occupied in something elsewhere in Accra, she has sent a story of an event that she organized last week to do with the African Continental Free Trade Area and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa in Malawi, in Southern Africa. So basically, the African Union Southern Africa Regional Office, which is AU-SARO, in partnership with government of Malawi, ECA, the sub-regional office for South Africa, and the AfCFTA Secretariat, organized an AfCFTA multi-stakeholders high-level conference on the 10th and 11th of February in Lilongwe. So the main objective of the conference was to sensitize stakeholders in Malawi on the AfCFTA agreement, as well as to review Malawi's preparedness and readiness to implement the agreement. The conference was officially opened by His Excellency Mark Katsonga Firi, who is a newly appointed Minister of Trade and Industry. And in the opening remarks, the minister stated that Malawi is proud of a decision to sign and ratify the AfCFTA agreement. He also further highlighted that this is not only because it is one of the founding members, but also because the country believes in the potential of AfCFTA as a catalyst for Africa's economic development and realization of the Malawi Vision 2063 and the AU's Agenda 2063. So the AU permanent representative to Southern Africa, the Ambassador David Claude Pierre, also stated that the AfCFTA will increase not only the ratio of industrial goods to extractive goods, but will ease the process of importing raw materials from other African countries, thus giving SMEs a better chance of succeeding. The Continental Free Trade Area is projected to increase intracontinental exports by more than 81%, while exports to non-African countries will rise by 19%. The net effect of these increases will contribute to the lifting of an additional 30 million people out of extreme poverty. They say by 2035, this is what is going to happen. And then 68 million people out of moderate poverty. In addition, Ms. Eunice G. Kamwendo, Director of ECA SRO, which is a sub-regional office of the ECA in Southern Africa, mentioned, I am aware that the Malawi AfCFTA strategy, which is a subcomponent of the National Export Strategy and National Trade Policy, will provide impetus for industrialization and development in line with the aspiration of Malawi Vision 2063 to transform Malawi into a wealthy and self-reliant, industrialized, upper middle income country by the year 2063, as well as regional development aspirations outlined in the SADC industrialization strategy and roadmap, the commercial industrial policy, and related trade protocols. The AfCFTA is a flagship project of Agenda 2063 of the AU. It aims at accelerating intra-African trade and boosting Africa's trading position in the global market by strengthening Africa's common voice and policy space in global trade negotiations. As of 10th February, 41 of the 54 signatories had deposited their instruments of AfCFTA. So it's just left remaining with 13 more countries that need to ratify, sign and to ratify this. So this is information sent to us by Miranda, the Senior Policy Officer at the Southern African Regional Office in Lilongwe. For those who don't know, the SARO, the AU SARO, is a representational office of the AU in Southern Africa. It develops, maintains constructive and productive relationships between the AU, its member states in the region, as well as SADC and COMESA. The office also aims to increase awareness about AU programs and its mission in the region, monitor socioeconomic and political and cultural developments, as well as liaise and harmonize specific policies of the AU in the Southern African region. So wherever you are, Miranda Lutempo, Senior Policy Officer at SAR, thank you very much for this piece. And we hope to have you the next time in Accra for a face-to-face interview where you'll be telling us what has been happening with the Southern African countries as far as AfCFTA is concerned. Let's quickly get to some other updates since today it's a bit of a mixed bag. So we can continue with the next story is on the UNDP and AfCFTA. So at the beginning of this year, UNDP invited myself and my colleague, Louis Afo, in our capacities as management of AfCFTA Policy Network, to help speak to Ghanaian journalists in Accra on what is happening around AfCFTA. So we were just two of the about 4 or 5 other let's say, quote unquote, consultants or resource people that have been asked by UNDP to help journalists understand and appreciate some of the developments around the African Continental Free Trade Area. At the end of the day, in the same way of what we are doing with this show, is using media for people to understand, one, Agenda 2063, how it works, why it's important, and also the African Continental Free Trade Area, also what it is, why it's important. At the end of the day, it's the media that needs to take the story, buy into it, and also begin to engage the public on why it's important, that AfCFTA is important. So to that end, we were in the hills, almost Peduasi, near Peduasi Lodge, that area, just for a couple of hours for one day in January. And we got to help journalists understand, go through the AfCFTA agreement, and also experiences and better reporting AfCFTA and this kind of thing. So UNDP and Ghana's Ministry of Trade and Industry together arranged this program, and we understand that they're going to be organizing this in different regions. They'll be doing one in Kumasi, I think another one in Eastern region, and some of the other regions over time, maybe this year, maybe next year, depends. But this is something that will be regular, and every now and then, UNDP and MOTI, Ministry of Trade and Industry in Ghana, will run these programs for journalists to appreciate that AfCFTA is here, and they need to understand it. And it's not just something that is useful for Accra journalists. Everyone needs to understand what the African Continental Free Trade Area. At the end of the day, the African Continental Free Trade Area really is a flagship project of Agenda 2063. So we cannot talk about AfCFTA without talking about Agenda 2063, because it is one of the 14 flagship projects, as is the freedom of movement, which I want to talk to you about right now. Freedom of movement protocol is something that not a lot of people are talking about, but we at AfCFTA Policy Network, it is one of the things that we are doing with the International Organization for Migration. The International Organization for Migration has been around for decades. It's the UN agency responsible for migration. And thankfully and luckily, we have been in a relationship with them since last August to help people understand why we need to break down the freedom of movement protocol. So we've been doing that on social media, through Twitter and that kind of thing. But the other thing is going forward, we'll be able to do a lot more things. Nice to see you, Oshodi. Yeah, we'll be able to do a lot more things on freedom of movement this year because IOM has been able to secure some kind of support to be able to do things like policy briefs and more interesting, innovative things that will help people understand why freedom of movement is very critical to the conversation on migration and to the conversation on AfCFTA. So we're looking forward to some updates on that over time. We'll definitely be also interviewing people from IOM responsible for this area of freedom of movement, or at least one person every month to help us, listeners and viewers and followers, better understand from the policymakers themselves why this area of freedom of movement is very, very, very important. Moving on to other things still related to AfCFTA, the World Customs Union based in Brussels, just a few days ago, just yesterday, signed an MoU with the African Continental Free Trade Area. This is very important, a very, very critical milestone thing, because at the end of the day, customs are the ones that are going to deal directly with the issues on the ports and all these other areas, as far as the African Continental Free Trade Area is concerned. So by having an MoU with the organization that deals, international organization that deals with customs, the AfCFTA Secretariat will begin to build its capacity on also how to strengthen the customs component for the Secretariat and also in the work that it does. The idea of the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat is not for it to be there in perpetuity. The idea is for AfCFTA to graduate to an African Continental Customs Union after about 20 or 25 years. That's a long way away, of course, because we haven't even sorted our free trade area yet. But when you move from a free trade area, the next thing you go to is a customs union. These are the cardinal points of what makes a regional integration arrangement sound. You don't just stick with the free trade area where people are able to send goods to across a particular space, duty-free, quota-free, or liberalized to an extent. No, you graduate. So eventually, Africa will get the African Common Market, African Continental Customs Union, and then a common market. The scheduled date for that is like 2034. That's quite some way away, but you never know. If member states get really serious, it could happen a lot earlier than 2034. So signing this World Customs Organization MoU with AfCFTA Secretariat is very good for all of us, for all those who are watching AfCFTA, watching Agenda 2063, because it means that the conversation has shifted very dramatically in a way that will begin to get people a lot more serious about looking towards the future and seeing what they can do to make sure that those who are dragging their feet, member states that are dragging their feet on tariff lines and all these other complicated economic stuff associated with AfCFTA, can quickly sort themselves out to get the free trade area running adequately, and then eventually graduate to a continental customs union, then a common market, where we'll finally have an African common market where goods are zipping across the sub-regions, duty-free, quota-free. That's the whole idea that we want to do with AfCFTA. For right now, the goods are liberalized up to 80%. Some countries are not happy with that level of liberalization, but over time, those conversations need to be had by trade ministers of all member states to say, hey, maybe too much liberalization. What can we do to protect our sensitive sectors, like textiles, like agric, like cocoa, and all these things, so that we don't overdo the liberalization but we can also begin to manufacture and build our productive capacities. So the World Customs Union MoU signed between AfCFTA, and there's a good start in our view on where the conversation on AfCFTA is going. And finally, being a member of the African Peer Review Mechanism Communications Network and coordinating the Champions Program, I can tell you on authority, recent meeting that we had, I think, a few days ago, conversations with the Africa Peer Review Mechanism, is that the APRM will be having a high-level meeting in third quarter with the AfCFTA Secretariat to have some very important conversations on developments around common areas of discussion. APRM is known for self-assessments for good governance on the continent, but the AfCFTA Secretariat last year reached out to APRM and said, look, APRM, you've been doing stuff on good governance. How can you come and work with us on trade so that we can get member states to also look at how they can be a bit more responsible on how they trade, bring some ethics into the trading. And it's not just about trading for the sake of trading, but kind of good governance around trade, and also help monitor compliance by member states on trade. So these are some of the things that would be discussed, we understand, apart from some other conversations that are scheduled between AfCFTA and APRM around September or so, hopefully in Accra or in Abuja, depending, for a very important conversation that will help shape and pave the way on where these institutions need to go. A lot of people probably didn't know that the OAU was established in 1963. So technically speaking, the OAU/AU has been running since 1963. But here's the catch. In 2002, at a meeting in Durban, South Africa, and many other meetings, some in Zambia, wherever else, the OAU decided to transform itself into an African Union. One of the things that makes the African Union different from the OAU is that the AU is a lot more interventionist, which is to say that the AU now is able to intervene in certain policy areas than the OAU was. OAU was more interested in liberating countries from colonialism and also setting them free from economic doldrums and so on. But the AU began to look at something that was close to the European Union without it being a replica. So the AU, for example, when people speak a bit technically, the AU has what it calls Article 4H of its AU Constitutive Act, which speaks to the AU intervening, for example, where there are human rights abuses, which is something that the OAU did not have. The AU has also been doing a lot of very interesting things, coming up with things like the legal side of things, like the African Human Rights, the African Court of Human and People's Rights in Gambia, and the African Court in Tanzania. Some people are speculating that these two should join together and become an African Court of Justice. We're not quite sure when that is going to happen. There's been lots of papers that have happened around that. Then there is there are things like the APRM, which was established in 2003, which will celebrate its 20 years next year, which has now become a byword for good governance on the continent. So everyone in AU systems and beyond, when they're talking about good governance and how it works, corporate governance and how it works, will come to the APRM, because that is the AU agency responsible and with the mandate to have that conversation. And then there's the Peace and Security Council. The AU may be criticized for a lot of things, but on peace and security, the AU clearly is world class. And it is not just people like me who are saying it.
People go update you.
Tons of academic articles, tons of academic pieces, both from the West and otherwise, speak of an AU that does very good work on peace and security. by virtue of the fact that there's a lot of conflicts on the continent. So its systems and structures under the African peace and security architecture allow it to do necessary important work to ensure that there is peace on the continent. So these are some of the things that make the AU worth celebrating. Some of them came from the OAU and have transitioned into AU, and some of them are new things that have popped up. But whatever the case may be, as Agenda 2063, we'll definitely be giving you updates as we head towards the 20th anniversary of the African Union in July, which is also very interesting because in July, the AU will also be celebrating African Integration Day on the 8th of July. So July is going to be quite an exciting time for this show, as well as May, because May is also the month where AU Day is celebrating on the 25th of May in some countries. So exciting times ahead for this show and those who monitor this show and all lovers of Africa. This is an important year to have very important, deep reflections on how the AU responds to crises, to the role of women, to education, and all these things. Because finally, let us not forget the role of the Association of African Universities itself. The Association of African Universities is itself an African AU institution responsible for implementing continental education strategies on the continent. It used to be in Morocco, then it relocated to Accra many years ago. And so here we are. The Association of African Universities is itself tied to the African Union as an educational institution, as one of many. There's also the Pan-African University institutions, some of which are based in all over the continent. There's one in Yaoundé that deals with the governance and translation and interpretation. There's one in South Africa that deals with sciences, space sciences. Kenya also has one that deals in, I believe, in renewable energies and so on. Then there's one in Morocco Algeria that deals with earth sciences. And then there's one in Nigeria, Ibadan, University of Ibadan, that deals with geography and some other related issues. So these are the centers of excellence of the Pan-African University. And a lot of people have graduated from these institutions since it was established, I believe, in about 10 years ago or so. So the conversation on the African Union continues. And we believe that the Agenda 2063 show will continue to unpack some of these in the best possible digestible way, because the AU is a complex institution that cannot be ignored no matter how hard we try. Because at the end of the day, Aspiration 7 of Agenda 2063 speaks to an AU as a global power. So if we need to aspire to the AU as a global power, where we get to the space of the Eswini consensus of 2005 that says the AU can have a seat at the UN Security Council, which has not yet happened, but we're hoping that it will happen someday, then the AU needs to continue to assert itself through the media, through programming, through education, and all these other things. And we believe that we're on the right track to do that. And Agenda 2063 TV show will do its bit to ensure that this happens in its modest way possible. So it is with that that I bring an end to the mixed bag today, but I see that Oshodi is on the line. I don't know, Oshodi, if you can hear me. Do you have any question to ask?
Yes, I said the conversation so far has been very fantastic. And I want to thank you for this telecast that keeps on educating and informing us on how we can come together as a continent. On the various issues that you have raised, in what area can we, in the actual sense, facilitate very pragmatic on-site realization of these aspirations that we have so talked about, with particular reference to regional integration? How can we deepen regional integration to define the African perspective? Because you see, trade or whatever other development facet cannot be possible if Africans cannot unite. So how do you think we can expand some of your conversations? How can we share your thoughts, particularly these telecasts now, to listeners out there who would want to ask several other questions? Are there links that they can we can send to them to continue to get informed and also send in questions via that link? What are all of these questions put together? How what is your response? Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Carl, thank you very much for that question. As you were asking the question, the only thing that came to mind was the media. I believe that at the end of the day, we need to continue to engage the media on these issues, because the media are the ones that are the frontliners of everything that we do. You know, the AU can do its own thing in its corner, ECOWAS can do its own thing, COMESA will do its own thing, but if the media does not come in to throw light on what they do, no one will really care. Because for people like us, like me, for example, who is not a scientist, I know that science has saved lives and does some excellent things, but I don't remember the last time I picked up a science journal to read, because it just is not my area. It is just not something that I would want to do unless I want to fall asleep very quickly. So if a journalist is able, for example, to tell me that and argue and articulate with passion how science has been able to contribute to Africa, has been able to help save lives, I will definitely pay more attention to science, which just goes to show that without or with an engaged and passionate media, we can achieve a lot, because there's some very good things happening on the continent across all sectors, let's be fair. But if the media is not able to communicate and articulate what they're doing, we will not get anywhere. This AfCFTA, for example, that we've been all been talking about, it is now becoming clear that a lot of journalists are now realizing that AfCFTA is part of the AU and is part of Agenda 2063. And why should that be happening 20 years down the line after the AU has been around plus? It is because they had not really made the connection before. Some of them had not paid attention to the AU. So for me, at the end of the day, it needs to be the media. We need to engage the media, sometimes provocatively, sometimes moral suasion, whatever. We need to engage the media to let them know that the AU is important. Agenda 2063 is important. All the things that the African Union discusses around education, women, agriculture, they are all important. It doesn't have to be communicated in the language that the AU communicates, but in a way that is understandable to them. My grandmother, for example, in the Central region, she used to do a lot of trading across in the Central region. God rest her soul. If she were alive, all I would have to tell her is that the trading that you used to do is what AfCFTA is, you know, and she would get it. I don't need to tell her that it is AfCFTA. She had been doing it long before AfCFTA came. So how do we break down these complex ideas for everybody to understand, especially those in the village? Because at the end of the day, Carl, as you know, every African comes from a village. So how do we communicate the things that we have learned around the AU to our relatives in the village in a way that they're able to understand and buy into the idea and spread the word over time that, hey, you know, my relative is working around this AU thing. This is what they do, blah, blah, blah. How do we do that? That's a huge challenge. But I think if we get a media that is committed, engaged, and sustained on the issues that you've raised in your question, we will make a lot more progress, because you and I have met very brilliant people who, when they talk, we know that they have the answers to problems. But if the media does not bring them out to the public, how will we know to know who they are? So we need that media. And sadly, as you will know, and not every country has a media that is engaged and passionate about Africa. So that's something, a real hurdle that we need to work on. But I think we have made some progress. We just need to find innovative ways to make it happen, so that the media also do their job and get everyone on track to buy into the African dream, which is Agenda 2063. I hope that has helped.
Yes, of course. It was responded to brilliantly. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. Okay, so it looks like Carl was the only question that I had. At this point, we need to wind down. So thank you very much. There'll be a recording of this, and for all those who followed and who follow even after this show has ended, want to say that we'd love to hear from you. Feedback is always very important, so that we do the best we can to improve the program content and improve the show as well. So thank you. My name is Ike Benson Jr. Thank you to the technical crew for making this happen, for the great work that they do, and for AAU for being one of the best AAU agencies, making sure that education of Agenda 2063 happens every single week. Thank you, guys, and we hope to speak to you wherever you are on your laptops and programs, wherever, next time for another exciting edition of the show. Have yourself a great day. Goodbye.